Now, Logitech's MX Master 3 and 3S were almost the perfect mice. They had excellent ergonomics, great battery life, and versatile enough for pretty much most day-to-day use. But now we have the Master 4, and on paper, it doesn't seem like all that significant of an upgrade. It has the same internal sensor of the 8000 DPI, 125 Hz pull rate, and generally the same shape as the previous generation. But there are some subtle changes that actually make the MX Master 4 a pretty decent upgrade in my opinion. I've been using it for the past couple of weeks, and I'm going to show you the key differences between the MX Master 4, 3S, as well as the original 3 to see how they fit in the lineup and find out which one is right for you. Now here's our lineup of the Master 3, 3S, and 4. The original Master 3 came out in 2019, 2022 for the Master 3S, and 2025 naturally for the 4. Now we actually had the original Master 3 over here since 2019. That's held up pretty well. It basically has the same exact design as the 3S. Externally, there's really no difference between the two, and they both employ this kind of rubberized, ultra grippy texture finish, which definitely feels very grippy in the hand, but after a few years does wear out the rubberized finish and leaves a more shiny finish as a residue. It's not the most hypogenic material and definitely leaves stains and grease if you are dirty with your usage. The 4 utilizes a matte, dull plastic finish, which definitely feels a little bit more durable, although not as grippy as the original Master 3 and 3S. Now the core shape of the Master 4 is pretty much the same as the Master 3 and 3S, which is definitely a good thing. Why change something that isn't broken? But there are some subtle changes, not only in terms of material design, but the edges themselves are rounded off on the left-right click buttons, and the click buttons themselves are larger and translucent, unlike the Master 3 and 3S. The big thing is, how do they sound? Obviously with the 3S, they were a lot quieter than the original Master 3, about 90% quieter with a dampening effect, and they had a nice still tactile sensation. Some people actually prefer the clicky sound, however, but how does the Master 4 sound compared to the 3? Let's take a look. Master 3. S. 4. Now, based on what I can hear, the 4 is slightly quieter than even the 3S. It has a more dampened, rounder off sound, so certainly not as distracting if you're on a Zoom call and things like that. But I also feel that the sensation of the click is completely different than the 3S. It pretty much has an immediate initial click response and then a dampened bottom position response. Feels very refined and a little bit more higher quality, and in conjunction with the haptic feedback, the actual usage profile of the Master 4 feels a little bit more premium and higher end compared to even the 3S. Now, as we move down with the mouse onto the horizontal scroll wheel, you're going to notice that it's in line with the left click button. It pretty much copies that radius perfectly, and it definitely gives you a better, easier access from an ergonomic standpoint compared to the 3 and 3S, which the horizontal scroll wheel was inside this valley, and you kind of had to dig in sometimes to get access to it. But here it's immediate, and it's right along the surface of the mouse, so definitely a better design. Underneath that area where your thumb will live, they've pretty much redesigned the 4. You can see now we have 3 side buttons instead of 2. Obviously you have your front back buttons, but at the front of the mouse you can see that we have now a new gesture button, which is fully programmable, and right underneath that, where the old gesture pressure sensitive thumb control was, you now have an action button, which can be also a gesture control button depending on your configuration. But out of the box, it's programmed for the action ring, which is a menu system that allows you quick access to everyday things. So if you want to open up folders, notes, get access to most of the popular AIs, as well as record a screenshot or whatever you like, you can configure this action ring to your everyday preferences. Now, the action ring is not exclusive to the 4. You could still program it on the 3 and 3S. You just have to use one of the buttons to compromise. This was one of the benefits of having 8 buttons on the 4 compared to the 7 on the 3 and 3S. Now on the right hand side of the mouse, the 4 seems like a more gradual fall off to your lower palm area versus the 3 has a little bit more of a drastic curve, but generally they feel like 99% the same when they're in the palm of your hand. The main scroll wheel on the Master 4 is exactly the same as the 3 and 3S, which has the hyper scroll functionality, which allows you to go from click to hyper scroll in an instant depending upon your velocity and acceleration of your scroll speed. And the overall friction of the hyper scroll wheel is pretty much the same. They both glide the same amount of distance, and the click to click sensation in terms of friction also feels the same as the previous generation mice. Now the bottom of the mouse has been redesigned. You can see that the PTFE Feet placement is larger and different in terms of arrangements. We also have material that surrounds around the sensor, which is nicely protected. It still scratches fairly easily, and the overall gliding performance is, I think, pretty much on par with each other. And the overall PTFE material that Logitech uses is pretty much the cheapest stuff that you can get. So a lot of people do customize the feet underneath to get better slide performance, but out of the box, it's not too bad for most people's needs. What is a big improvement though is when you remove this PTFE material on the 4 is that you get access to some of the internals, including the battery. So there is some serviceability and potentially upgradability involved in the 4 if you want to replace a dead battery or even the internal components. So serviceability is definitely a big plus on the 4 compared to the 3, which is a much bigger hassle. Now as far as weight goes, since we have the haptic feedback, more buttons on the 4, it is going to be naturally heavier, 152 grams based on my scale, versus the 3 and 3S were about 143 pounds. Now inside, the Master 4 is pretty much using the exact same sensor as found on the 3S, which is the dark field 8000 DPI sensor, which can be used on pretty much any desktop surface, including glass. It's still at the same sensitivity range at 8000, which is perfectly fine for most day-to-day usage. It's not a gaming mouse, but the pull rate is only at 125 hertz, which is not good enough for most monitors that are at least 144 or greater in terms of refresh rate. So that's kind of a bummer that Logitech is still using this kind of cut down sensor for their all-in-purposes premium line productivity mouse. Now, as far as battery life goes, based on Logitech's website, they're claiming up to 650 milliamp hour battery on the Master 4, but looking at the bottom portion of my Master 4, it says it has a 5000 milliamp hour battery. So I'm not too sure what is the exact capacity of the battery on the 4, but I know that the 3S had a 5000 milliamp hour battery. It gives you about 70 days of usage, and Logitech claims that we're going to get the same exact battery life as the 3S, about 70 days. But I definitely think that the battery life, if it's the same exact capacity, won't be as good, because especially if you're using the haptic feedback system on the high setting and it's vibrating all the time, it's definitely going to drain that battery life a lot quicker than the 3S, which has no haptic feedback system. So if you're really wanting to stretch out the battery life as much as possible, you might want to even turn off the haptic feedback system. And speaking of haptic feedback, let's talk about it on the 4. It's basically a way to get physical connection of what's happening on screen. Now, it doesn't work on all applications. There's certain plugins that you can download from Logitech's marketplace, and most of the Adobe suite is supported, as well as DaVinci Resolve, and there might be other plugins for other applications. But if you go into the Logitech's native software, for example, when you hit the action wheel and scroll over a specific icon, it'll give you a little vibration that you've gone over that, and you can click on it, and it just gives you a little bit more interactivity. It's a novelty nonetheless. I could definitely see some benefits from an accessibility standpoint, especially for people that are visually impaired, or even certain gaming circumstances and things like that. But it's basically for now a novelty that gives you a little bit more interaction on what's happening on screen, and a fun feature nonetheless. However, one thing I do like is the the actual physical button itself. You can see that the action button is large and very easy to press onto, versus on the 3 and 3S, the thumb pressure sensitive gesture control button sometimes wears out, and you do actually have to press it quite hard in a specific area in order to initiate it. So the button design is definitely an improvement from the previous generation. Now, as far as connectivity goes, from a physical standpoint, you still have USB-C charging ports at the front of the mice, and those are only used for charging, no data connection whatsoever, so you can't really use it as a wired mouse if you want to. They obviously have Bluetooth integration up to 3 devices connectivity, as well as the Logitech Bolt 2.4 GHz USB dongle that's included in all of these mice, and that gives you a little bit more stable frequency. Logitech does claim that the newer generation that's on the 4 gives you a little bit more stable connection, especially in noisy environments, but based on what I can tell, I don't see any difference in terms of latency or anything like that. Now, to sum up everything we talked about, let's talk about the MX Master 4 from a pros and cons perspective. Some of the pros are definitely that it has better ergonomics, more wear-friendly overall design from the previous generation. The serviceability is great, and the haptic feedback is a nice novelty on top of having the gesture control buttons, and a just better ergonomic standpoint from my perspective based on my usage for the past couple of weeks using the Master 4. So I definitely think from those perspectives, it is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. Now, in terms of some of the minor downsides, we still don't have any onboard memory on the mouse itself. You're always tied to the Logitech software, which you're going to have to install in your individual PC. So if you move around from PC to PC, you are going to need to make sure you have the Logitech utility installed, as well as logged into your account, since we don't have any onboard memory profiles. On top of that, some people may not like the slippery overall texture of the feel. So if you like that very rubberized texture of the previous generation, that's gone. The other kind of downside is the fact that it is a heavier mouse, about 20 grams or so more than the 3S, and these days every gram counts, and especially in the mouse world. So if you're looking for a lighter mouse, unfortunately the 4 is not the one for you. Furthermore, the PTFE material at the bottom of the mouse is definitely better placed and has more surface material than the previous generation, which definitely will wear a little bit better. But overall, the material that Logitech uses isn't honestly the best. And if you're looking for excellent sliding performance, a lot of people will probably upgrade or have some sort of custom solution or use a really nice quality mouse pad. But if you're just using a general surface, sometimes the sliding performance honestly isn't the great on the Master series. And last but not least is the fact that we're still using the same old dark field sensor, 8000 DPI, as well as 125 Hz pull rate. I don't think that the 8000 DPI is that big of a concern for most general day-to-day use, since this is not really targeted for gamers, and you can certainly game with 8000 DPI, but the big thing is the 125 Hz pull rate. If you've upgraded to a higher refresh rate monitor, it's kind of wonky to see the scrolling performance not be as smooth as it could be with this quite generally premium general purpose mouse. And even though the performance is adequate for most people's day-to-day needs, I don't think that we're looking at 2025 technology inside over here. So Logitech is definitely saving some money by keeping the old sensor in here. Now, in summary, the price point between the 3S and the 4 is not that big of a difference. You're looking at $20 to $30 in most circumstances, and I definitely think that that extra money is worth it for the 4. Better ergonomics, better wear and tear materials. You have the haptic feedback system, and just a generally better mouse, all things considered. Yes, there are some downsides, but I think for most people, they're kind of minor and probably will never notice those downsides. But I'd love to know what you guys think. What mouse are you specifically using for your general day-to-day needs? And what do you think of the Master 4? Do you think it's worth it compared to the 3S? Or would you still keep your older generation Master Series mouse? If you have any specific questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Please make sure to like and subscribe and have post notifications turned on. We'll see you real soon in the next one, and take care. Bye-bye.